if you agree that power will make you corrupt, then that means there is no hope. That means there is no hope from the public servants, because public servants will get power, and if that is necessarily going to make them corrupt, that means you can't have honest civil servant at all. And therefore, you should not agree with this type of quotations. Hello friends, in the UPSC Civil Services examination, every year there are many questions which are based on quotations. So today we are going to learn how to answer the quotation based questions in UPSC. So friends, first of all, we'll learn the importance of quotation. We know that quotations contain the truth in the most condensed form. You will generally find that in a few words, in just one sentence, lot of wisdom will be there. Like honesty is the best policy. Just few words, great wisdom. And so, when these type of quotations are asked to be explained, then your knowledge, your wisdom, your understanding of the word is tested. So, these quotations are generally not asked on the random basis. These quotation topics will be coming from your topics of general studies. There are some specific topics also which are mentioned in your syllabus. For example, in GS Paper 4, you will find the topics like contribution of the moral thinkers and philosophers from India and the world, and the lessons from the lives and teachings of the great leaders, reformers and administrators. Now, these are the topics from which only quotation-based questions are asked. So far, they have not asked for the philosophy in detail, but they will give the quotation and ask you to explain it, and thereby they will be able to understand your depth of knowledge. But it's not necessary that only from these famous moral thinkers, philosophers and leaders the quotation will come. Quotations can be asked from any topics which is covered in the syllabus. Now, what should be our strategy? So that we are going to learn. So we have to use the right strategy to write precise and relevant answer to these questions. But before we proceed, let us understand some of the questions which has been asked based on quotation in the latest Civil Services Examination GS Paper 4 of 2020. Let's first talk about the quotations where the author name is given. So, quotes from the famous people. What are the questions which has been asked? What do each of the following quotation means to you? Condemn none. If you can stretch out a helping hand, do so. If not, fold your hands, bless your brothers, and let them go in their own way. A quotation by Swami Vivekananda. Another quotation. The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of other, Mahatma Gandhi. A system of morality which is based on the relative emotional values is a mere illusion, a thoroughly vulgar conception that has nothing sound in it and nothing true. A quotation by Socrates. These quotations are given along with the name of their author. But there are many other quotations also which are from unknown sources. For example, education is not an injunction. It is an effective and pervasive tool for all-round development of an individual and social transformation. Examine the new education policy 2020 in light of the above statement. Now, this is a quotation where we don't know the source. Another quotation. Hatred is destructive of a person's wisdom and conscience that can poison a nation's spirit. Do you agree with this view? Justify your answer. Third, the will to power exists, but it can be tamed and be guided by rationality and principles of moral duty. Examine this statement in context of international relations. And the fourth was, the current internet expansion has instilled a different set of cultural values which are often in conflict with the traditional values discussed. So friends, here we have seen that there are 4 quotations where the questions has been asked based on them, but we don't know the source, authorship of that. So you have seen that there are 7 questions in the general studies paper 4 where questions are pertaining to the quotations. Now each question is of 10 marks and you have to write the answer in 150 words. So you can see that substantial contribution of such type of questions are asked in the civil services examination. Now let's go for the strategies to answer these quotation based questions. So first of all, let's talk about the quotations from the famous thinkers. Given below are 3 quotations of great moral thinkers and philosophers. For each of these quotations, bring out what it means to you in the present context. Now this was asked in Civil Services 2013. So these 3 quotations are as following. There is enough on earth for everyone's need, but for no one's greed, by Mahatma Gandhi. Nearly all men can withstand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power, by Abraham Lincoln. I count him braver who overcomes his desires than whom overcomes his enemies, by Aristotle. Now these are the 3 quotations. You know the authorship and now you have to explain this quotation in the present context. So let's see what should be our strategy. Now remember that in our preparation of general studies paper, we learned about the important personalities. For example, Mahatma Gandhi, Dr. Kalam, Abraham Lincoln, Chanakya, Socrates. We learned about the personalities, their thoughts, their beliefs, their contribution in this world. So whenever we are answering these type of answers, quotations answers, we must always keep in mind the life of the philosophy and their vision. So we must think like them. So if the quotation pertained to Gandhiji, think like Gandhiji. If Gandhiji would have said these words, what he would have meant. And for that we require the thorough knowledge of the personality. So write the answers from their perspective, the perspective of the famous thinkers and philosophers, using your imagination. And use this wisdom to present in the present context, particularly in respect of the public administration. Remember that some of these quotations has been said thousands of years ago, like Aristotle. He said long ago. If we talk about Abraham Lincoln, he said in the context of America. But we must find out what is the relevance in the present time. And that's how we are going to answer these questions. Sometimes the source of the person who has given this quotation is unknown. For example, we will talk about some of the questions like that. Integrity without knowledge is weak and useless, but knowledge without integrity is dangerous and dreadful. What do you understand by this statement? Explain your stand with illustration in the modern context. Here we don't know who has said this particular quotation. Let's go to the second question. Given are the 2 quotations of moral thinkers and philosophers. Explain what these means to you in the present context. First was, the weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong, and we can easily forgive a child who is afraid of dark, but the real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of light. Now these are the quotations from famous thinkers and we don't know who has said that. Now from my knowledge I can say that the weak can never forgive quotation has been given by Mahatma Gandhi, and we can easily forgive a child quotation has been given by Plato. But at the examination hall, you may not know who has actually said these words. So how to tackle these type of quotations? So let's understand the strategy for tackling such type of quotations. So here we don't have any knowledge of the source of the quotation, and so you can't get the benefit of the personality, his attributes, his philosophy. These quotations, for example, which I mentioned, belong to Samuel Johnson, Mahatma Gandhi and Plato. But the source of the quotation is not known, but that is not very relevant also, because what you have to focus is the knowledge and on the person who has given these quotations. So you have to write the answer of these quotations based on what is being said rather than who has said these words. So here we have to use our knowledge of ethics, philosophy in general studies paper, and then we have to explain the quotations in the modern context, and particularly from the perspective of ethics and the public administration. We have to give some sort of illustrations or examples to validate our answer. So remember that even if the source is not given, it does not make a difference to you, though you may not have the benefit of knowing the personality. Nevertheless, focus on the words, focus on the spirits of the word, and write the answers. Now, sometimes you can also expect some unethical quotations. For example, power tend to corrupt and absolute power corrupt absolutely, John Acton. A person should not be too honest, straight trees are cut first and honest people are ruined first, by Chanakya. Politics have no relations to morals, by Machiavelli. Now these quotations are unethical in nature, not very moral thing, but they are practical. So what should be our strategy for such type of quotations? First of all, these quotations actually refer the practical wisdom and they are not altogether ethical. And remember that we are writing the paper of ethics, integrity and aptitude. As a civil servant, we must be ethical. And therefore, when you are going to ask to explain this quotation, to justify this quotation, or you have to discuss this quotation, as far as possible, you must not agree with such quotations entirely. I am not saying that what Chanakya said is wrong or what Machiavelli said is wrong. But remember that those things are not to be done by any ethical person. So you must justify the opposite, that is the ethical view, with reason and illustration. For example, let us say when you have to talk like power tend to corrupt and absolute power corrupt absolutely, don't just say that this is true, but rather you must say that actually power exposes the true character of a person, and therefore if the person is having a right character, then he will use the power in the right way and do a lot of good. Because ultimately, if you agree that power will make you corrupt, then that means there is no hope. That means there is no hope from the public servants, because public servants will get power, and if that is necessarily going to make them corrupt, that means you can't have honest civil servant at all. And therefore, you should not agree with this type of quotations. But nevertheless, you must not totally disagree with them because they are coming from famous personalities, and you must give proper reason for that, and that will make your answer shine. You don't have to agree with that, unless of course you are asked to justify. If you are asked to discuss, if you are asked to explain, try to take the ethical position in such type of quotations. The fourth type of quotations where you have questions are philosophical type of quotations. Now let's take some example. What does the following quotes mean to you in the present context? Falsehood takes the place of truth when it results in unblemished common goods, by Thirukural. In the same way, you have what do the following quotations mean to you? An unexamined life is not worth living, Socrates. Now these are the quotations which are very philosophical in nature. It's not easy to understand these quotations simply. So what should be our strategy to answer such type of quotations? First of all, the meaning of these quotations are very, very deep and very, very mysterious. And therefore, don't answer these questions immediately. Try to understand the different dimensions of this particular quotations. There can be multiple interpretation of the same quotation, and it is not very easy to comprehend these quotations because the depth of their message, and they're counterintuitive also. So try to study the thoughts of the philosophers in depth, because when you learn the different philosophies in your general studies paper, you understand the opposite philosophies. Like for example, utilitarian deontology, opposite. Epicureanism and then Stoicism, opposite. So that way you will have the depth of the philosophies, because you will be able to understand all type of complex philosophical thoughts. And then After you have understood it properly, try to interpret them using your own knowledge of ethics, integrity, and public administration. Remember that the knowledge which you acquire in ethics about the philosophy will make you capable of interpreting such complex philosophical thoughts. Now, sometimes we have explicit statement, and there the quotations are given. For example, increased national wealth did not result in equitable distribution of its benefit. It has created some enclaves of modernity and prosperity for a small minority at the cost of majority. Justified. Next question. In doing a good thing, everything is permitted which is not prohibited explicitly or by clear implication. Examine this statement with suitable example in the context of public servant discharging his or her duties. CSE 2018. So friends, these types of quotations, we don't know the source. These are like gospel truth or a truth which has been summarized. Now, in general, we should agree with that because they appear to be logical and reasonable. So what should be our strategy to write answers for such type of quotations? What should be our strategy? First of all, the explicit statement may be coming from a person, from a report, or an study. The source is not known, but there is a truth hidden in this type of quotations. You have to either agree or disagree with the statement and provide for the justification of the same. For example, here you have to justify. Now, whether you agree with this or not, you must explain with justification. That means you have to defend it like a lawyer. In the second question, you have to examine, you have more flexibility over there. But you have to again justify this particular statement because this statement is an ethical statement and in the interest of public. So, explicit statement basically may come from any source and you must agree or disagree with that depending upon whether it is ethical or unethical. But if you are asked to justify, then you have to agree with that particular statement. If the statements are ethical, agree with them and explain the government point of view, and it should be in tune of the government policy. Try to see that don't write anything which is against the government policy. So if the government policy is inclusive development, we must always keep that in mind while we are going to answer the question of quotation 1, which basically talks about inclusive development. In the same way, we have to take a stand which is moral and legal. And in the same way, we have to take the stand which is moral, ethical, and legal. And we must use the proper context for answering these questions. So these are the things we have to keep in mind while answering these explicit statement-based quotations. So friends, today we have learned how to plan and strategize answering the questions which are based on quotation. I hope that on the basis of this lesson, you'll be able to write good answers of the quotations which are asked in the civil services examination. Thank you very much.